I had never heard of Bethlehem University, and so I thought we could just start by you kind of painting the picture of the university, kind of the story of how it got there, what its mission is, and we can go from there.
Good, thank you. And thank you also, John, for eventually persuading me. I found the conference so far incredibly inspiring and thought-provoking. I'm always curious about people and what they're doing, and I didn't understand much of what was said in detail this morning, but I was really impressed with the passion that people had to try and support people who are suffering and trying to do the best for them. Bethlehem University began in 1973, and so I was there for the 50th Jubilee in 2023. And at the time when it began, there wasn't a registered university in Palestine. So any students wanting to have a tertiary education were going to the Gulf, to Europe or England or to the United States straight after secondary school. And then they got embedded in those places and were not coming back. And so there was a concern about the fact that there was an exodus of young people from Palestine. So what happened was that a committee was put together to find a way of stemming that, and the university emerged from that on the 1st of October 1973. It was just interesting that on the 1st of, during that time, that was the start of the Yom Kippur War, and we had our Golden Jubilee on the weekend before the 7th of October with another war. So my time at Bethlehem University was bookended by wars. I arrived there in the end of November 2008 when the war on Gaza, 2008-2009, and then I left there in January 2024 when another attack on Gaza was there. One of the things about Bethlehem University, it's a relatively small university in Palestine. It has about 3,200 students in 5 faculties, business, education, nursing, arts and science. And then it has an Institute of Hotel Management and Tourism. One of the things about Bethlehem is its economy is really not based on, but hugely impacted by tourism and pilgrimage. And that's why at present things are very, very difficult there, and people are struggling because there are just no pilgrims coming and haven't been since October 2023. So the university has continued. COVID was a major interruption for us. Because we tried to go online and there were all sorts of complications as happened in other universities around the world and in terms of accessibility to that, and so I don't want to go there, but we have established ourselves as a university of quality, and one of the things that I'm often asked is, what is an unashamedly Catholic, unapologetically Christian university doing in a country where there's less than 1% of the population Christian? And I tell people, well, the first thing is we're not trying to convert the other 99%. The second thing is that if you go back 2,000 years to when Jesus started his ministry there, we're doing better than he had. He had 0 Christians when he started, so at least we have 1%. But if you seriously go back and ask, well, what was he trying to do there? And if you go to chapter 10, verse 10 of St. John's Gospel, he makes it very clear, I have come that they may have life, life in all its fullness. That's what Jesus was doing, and it's exactly what Bethlehem University is doing. Whether they be Christians or Muslims or no faith at all, what we're seeking to do is to create an environment, develop an atmosphere, and provide an opportunity for our students to acquire the knowledge, to gain the skills, and then to develop those attitudes, those virtues, those approaches that are going to enable them to live life as fully as they possibly can. And so that's the core of what we are trying to do, trying to establish that environment, that atmosphere, and then provide those opportunities. And with all due humility, I think we're doing a pretty good job at doing that.
Thank you. So that's great background on how the university came to be. I'm wondering about the lives of the students there. Kind of how do they find you? What is a day-to-day? Can you give us paint the picture of what a day in life is like for a student?
Okay. About 40% of our students come from East Jerusalem. So they come through the wall each day and they're faced with checkpoints. But one of their major hassles is that most of them come by bus, and those buses can be stopped by any group of Israeli military, and they can be herded off the bus. They can be interrogated, their IDs searched and whatever. Sometimes some of them are not allowed back on the bus, and we've had instances where the same bus has been stopped twice or even 3 times by different groups of Israeli military. So when they leave home to come to Bethlehem University, they're not sure whether they're going to get there on time. And fortunately, there's a really good atmosphere at the university, and the students who are from Bethlehem or who don't have to come through the checkpoint take account of the fact if somebody is late coming and take notes for them and supports them that way. That is a major hassle. We have some students coming from Ramallah, which is probably half an hour's drive away, but they have to come through 2 checkpoints, so it can take them an hour and a half. And there have been times when they've got to the checkpoint and not allowed to come through. So those are people coming through the checkpoints. And then there are people from Hebron, and from Hebron to Bethlehem, there are often what they call flying checkpoints, where the Israelis just put either 2 vehicles and they stop everybody and check their IDs. And that is a problem for them. And so one of the things we are trying to do is to create a little oasis of peace at Bethlehem University, so that when people step onto campus, I want them to know that they are safe, and I want them to know that there are people there who really care about them, who are concerned about them getting to the campus, but also concerned about them making the best use of the time that they have in being on campus. But, you know, there's Elias, one of the guys from, a student from Jerusalem, talked to me about the fact that one of the things he finds difficult is coming through the checkpoints, but that many of his friends in Bethlehem, after university is finished, and he can't visit them, and they can't visit him at all, because they can't get permits to go through the wall into Jerusalem. Because there are students from Bethlehem, from Hebron, and from the villages around Bethlehem and Bajala, who can come to Bethlehem University, which is the highest point in Bethlehem, and they can look over the wall into Jerusalem, but have never been allowed to go there. And so that's a cause of concern. They've never been able to see the sea. I grew up on the sea in Taranaki in New Zealand. I don't know what it would be like not to have seen the sea, you know. And most of these guys and girls in the West Bank have never set eyes on the sea. Is that enough?
Peter, I didn't understand the wall before I went there. Can you just explain what the wall is, please?
Okay. You go back into the late 1990s, 1980s. There was, after 1967, when Israel moved in and took over the West Bank, there was an oppressive regime that they set in place. And so there was constant opposition to that. And what happened in 87 was at the outbreak of what was called the First Intifada. and that wasn't particularly, well, it was violent, but it started off as a non-violent protest about the taxes and the restrictions that the Israeli military was imposing on the Palestinians. And in 1967, it was a significant and major military victory for the Israelis when they took over Jordan, took over Hebron, took over the Golan Heights and Gaza. And it's one thing to militarily take over something like that. It's another issue to manage it once you've got it. And they were finding it really, really difficult. So what happened was that in 1993, the Oslo Agreement was signed, which led to an enormous optimism among the Palestinians, that at last it looked as though they were going to get a state. But as it's turned out, it was an absolute disaster, and I won't go into that now, but as a result, by the end of the 90s, that became clearer. And so in 2000, Sharon took a group of his security and went on to the Temple Mount, or around Alaska Mosque, and that started the Second Intifada. And the Second Intifada was much, much more violent than the First Intifada. And unfortunately, the Palestinian, or small groups of the Palestinians, started the suicide bombings, which was a disaster for Israel, a disaster for Palestine as well. So what happened was, shortly after the Second Intifada started, the Israeli government decided to build the wall. And Sharon, the Prime Minister, was wanting to separate Palestine from Israel and protect Israelis from the war, from suicide bombings. However, what happened was that the Palestinians realised at the beginning of the early part of the 2000s that the suicide bombings were causing them to be ostracised by the rest of the world, and it was not helping them, so they decided to stop. It just so happened that the start of the wall in 2002 coincided with that. And so Sharon has claimed, or had claimed before he died, that the wall had prevented suicide bombings from occurring. Now, the wall is still not finished. I know young people who go around the end of the wall to get into Jerusalem. And the wall reached Bethlehem in 2005. And it is as tall as this room, the walls here. It's concrete structure, but it snakes its way around Bethlehem and around Jerusalem, separating the Palestinians from Jerusalem. The claim that it stopped suicide bombings is crazy, not only because of what I mentioned about it's possible to get around it, but there are 2 million Palestinians in Israel, 2 million Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, let alone the Palestinians who are in East Jerusalem. So if a suicide bomber wanted to blow people up, it would be quite easy to do that. But it was a way, if you overlay the water resources with the wall, you find that the wall snakes around and takes into Israel a lot of the water resources that exist in Palestine. So the wall is a major barrier. People have told, it was there when I arrived in Palestine, but people have told me prior to that, on a Saturday, there were literally hundreds, probably thousands of Israelis would come into the markets in Palestine to buy things. So there was interaction between the Israelis and the Palestinians. But once the wall went up, the Knesset passed a law that it was illegal for Israeli citizens to come into Palestine. So as a result, we don't have any Jewish students at Bethlehem University. We can't have any Israeli citizens as professors at the university. Another restriction, we can't have any international students or faculty teaching or working at Bethlehem University either.
So when you were first offered the position to become Vice Chancellor there, I was just wondering what your hopes were for and sort of expectations for the position, and then how that changed over time.
Well, I had the good fortune in 2007, a group of 6 of us went on a tour of the Middle East and had arranged to be in Bethlehem, of course, on Christmas Day. And that was my first visit to Bethlehem. And like yourself, I had not really heard of Bethlehem University before I got there. But what I had heard was how difficult it was financially for them to survive. So in my mind, I had an impression that, so in New Zealand we talk about makeshift things as sort of having army huts. So I had this impression that Bethlehem University was made up of these army huts. And I was just stunned when I went there and saw these beautiful stone buildings. And the main building was built in 1893, and then the others subsequently to Bethlehem University beginning. And after Christmas lunch, one of the brothers took us for a tour around, and we have an amphitheatre, and at that stage, before we built the education building, at the top of the amphitheatre you could look to the left and see Gilo, a settlement there, and to the right and see Hahoma. And the brother was talking about this and going on a little bit about it, and I can remember thinking to myself, this was not what I thought Bethlehem University was going to be like. And I'll probably never see it again. That was December 2007. December 2008, I was there. Really, in my naivety, I had no idea really what to expect. I knew something about the hassles that were there, but I suppose what I was hoping for was to be able to use what influence I had, what connections I had, to try to provide the best opportunities for the students who came to Bethlehem University.
Thank you. So speaking of the students, do you want to tell us any of their stories, one or two who've had great impact on you that you want to share?
Well, the one, I suppose, one of the things in wanting to provide the best opportunities is wanting students to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think, there's a whole variety of motivations for students to be at Bethlehem University. And I mentioned to Kelly before that not a lot, but I knew some of them came to Bethlehem University to get a husband or wife. Study was something they had to do in order to be there. But I have very, very clear recollections of Almataz. Almataz came from a village called Wallagy. We have Bethlehem on the bottom of a hill, and then there's the hill where Bajala, and over the back of the hill is this little village called Wallagy. Now, one of the things that emerged out of the Oslo Agreement was that Palestine was divided into 3 areas, A, B and C. A was supposed to be under complete control of the Palestinians, B was supposed to be joint control, and C was under complete control of the Israeli military. That didn't really work. The Israeli military just come in anywhere they want to. But Wallagy is in Area C, and it's virtually impossible for Palestinians to get permission to build in Area C. And Almataz's older siblings were getting married and were living in the house, so they just built on. And then unpredictably, the Israeli military came along and said you didn't have permission to build these, so they demolished the house. Then over a period of time, because they had nowhere else to live, they rebuilt the house. And I was speaking to Al-Mataz shortly after it had been demolished for the second time. And he said, you know, they've taken my house, they've taken my land, they've taken my freedom, but they can't take my education. And it was that sort of appreciation that he had for what the opportunity he had to come to Bethlehem University that, you know, I just found incredibly inspiring, given what had happened to his house twice. It was the fact that he had the opportunity to get an education that really was so important to him. And another young woman from Hebron, Rahad, she came to Bethlehem University and she talks about the fact that her perspective was very, very narrow when she came. And that as a result of being at Bethlehem University, her heart had been trained on peace. And that she felt as a result of being there, she had a responsibility to learn about and to improve this world. And so she went on to do a master's degree, and now she's in the process of getting a doctorate as well. And it's those sorts of people, I suppose, that I find just incredibly inspiring. The resilience that they have, given what they have to do to get to university, I just find it fascinating. But there's one young woman, Joanna, from Jerusalem, who had to come by bus every day. And she talked to me about the fact that her house is just next to a checkpoint and she has to stand outside where the bus stop is. And she always makes sure, before she leaves the house, that she has the money in her hand for the bus. So that when she's waiting at the bus stop beside the checkpoint, she doesn't have to put her hand into her bag and the soldier might think she has a weapon and shoot her. And this is just what she does every morning. And I did a presentation at Loyola University in Chicago some years back to the faculty there. And I said, how many of your students have to think about that as they prepare to come to university? But see, one of the other things that really strikes me is the way in which their resilience leads them to just, you know, this is what I've got to do in order to get to university. This is what I've got to do if I'm going to get my education. It's just par for the course. I just find that amazing. Yeah.
Peter, I think one of the things when I had the great privilege of going to this university in the beautiful buildings, which incidentally have gun marks that have been shot intermittently from the Israeli forces. Most of us here teach medical students, allied health, nursing staff. Lecture theatres get smaller and smaller because less and less people come to classes. And yet what I saw with your students was sometimes, as you're saying, the actual journey as the crow flies was maybe 15 minutes, but they would have to spend 3 hours getting there. But what you told me at the time, I think, was that your dropout rate was infinitesimally small. So here are these amazing young people with such a hunger for education that they'll turn up despite checkpoints, despite getting taken off buses, despite not being allowed through X, Y, and Z. And yet, with our Australian, American, European, Japanese kids, we can't get them there when they get an Uber from the front door to the back door. Are there any lessons that we can learn from through adversity? I'm not sure if Kath Maitland's here, but Kath talks about in Africa where they're short of oxygen, they have a concentrator, which is a machine that gives a certain amount of concentrated oxygen to one person. There's never enough machines. So what the people in Kenya had done was use an old intravenous fluid bag. The oxygen concentrator went into the old IV fluid bag. It acted as a reservoir. And they could, instead of feeding one kid some oxygen, they could feed 6 or 7 kids through adversity in Africa, through places that don't have the right stuff. But through adversity, what I saw in Palestine at least, the students have got that passion and that hunger for learning that seems to be entirely absent amongst my 5 children, at least.
Well, I wish I could say that Almataz's attitude is among all the 3,400 students, and that wouldn't be true. As I mentioned, there's a variety of reasons as to why people are at university. One of the things I've worked against was this attitude that once you leave secondary school, you really have to go to university. And there's a shortage of tradespeople. And, you know, my sense is that a lot of the people who come should really have gone, you know, university is not really suitable for them. And I think that's my experience in some other countries as well. So, no, I'm not in a position to tell people here what to do, but I think having a very clear reason as to why we're doing things is really important. And one of the big challenges at Bethlehem University is keeping hope alive. And it's one of the things I've struggled with because, you know, the students we have, their grandparents were driven out. We have 3 refugee camps in Bethlehem, and all of those people had been driven out in 1948 from Israel. So their whole history, their whole experience has been one of oppression. And so trying to figure out how to support them, how to keep them the hope alive. And it's one of the reasons that I'm really grateful to you, John, for having this opportunity, because what it means is that I can report back to Bethlehem that I had this opportunity here in Brisbane to talk to these incredible scientists and medical people about Bethlehem University, which shows them they are not forgotten. And I think for them to know that they are not forgotten is a really very, very important part of keeping hope alive there. The opportunities that we provide them, I think, help, but I think for them to know that they're not forgotten, because if you look at the international media, the impression that the world has of Palestinians is not really very positive. And I'm often is a bit too strong. Sometimes when I've given presentations, I must say mainly in the States, people come up to me afterwards and say, "Oh, brother, what you're doing there for those Palestinian people is just wonderful. You're providing them with these opportunities. And brother, you're so brave being there with all those terrorists." And I say, look, in 15 years, not once did I feel afraid when I was there. And I often had meetings down in Manger Square in the municipality or in Casanova, and I wouldn't think twice about walking back in the dark to the university and meet people and greet them. I found the Palestinians incredibly hospitable, welcoming, and gracious to me. You know. In fact, if I just tell a little aside, some years ago now, it'd be 10 or 12 years back probably, one of the brothers in New York was going to come to Bethlehem, and there'd been an incident which had been reported, and he phoned one of the brothers in Bethlehem and said, "You know, is it safe to come?" And Jack said, "Oh, well, you have to be very careful, you know, yeah, you really do make sure you take great care. But once you get on the plane, you should be okay." And, you know, that's my experience in Palestine has been a wonderfully enriching experience for me. And I was saying to Kelly, it's by far the most difficult job I've ever had in terms of the complexity of the university itself. See, we have about 20% of our students are Christian, 80% are Muslim. You have the whole thing about the people from, the students from Jerusalem, from Hebron, and then the complexity of that. And one of our biggest challenges is getting suitably qualified faculty, because they have to be Palestinian, and there's a shortage of such people. But in saying it's been the most difficult job, it's also, I've never been in a place where it is so obvious that what we are doing is worthwhile in providing that atmosphere and providing that opportunity of creating that little oasis of peace for them. And I think one of the real contributions I think Bethlehem University is making is in bringing Muslims and Christians together. There are many of our students, particularly from down in Hebron or around the Hebron area, who have never met a Christian until they come to Bethlehem University. And Elias, one guy who's graduated a few years back now, when he came to the end of his secondary schooling, he was desperate to get into our Faculty of Business, because it's the, with all due humility, it's the best one in Palestine. But it was at a Christian university. And so he talks about going back and forth, because he'd heard all these strange things about Christians. Anyhow, business won out and he came. And he laughs about the fact that after he'd been in class for a couple of weeks with Christians, on the campus with them, in the cafeteria with them, it suddenly dawned on him, they're just like me, you know. And then he went on for the 4 years, and in his last year, his best friend was a Christian. And I've met him several times since. And I thought he'd say that when we talked about the Christian-Muslim thing, I thought he'd say that he came to understand Christians as a result of being at Bethlehem University. But he didn't say that. What he said was, as a result of engaging with them, I came to appreciate Christians. And I think there's a nuance there that is quite different. And I think, you know, so many of them have that opportunity to engage with one another, and the Christians as well. But the Christians, because they're such a minority, are continually in touch with Muslims. But we have a required course of what we call religious studies, where they study Islam and Christianity. And one of the things that is different from their secondary school, in secondary schools they do that, but the Christians go off and study the Bible, the Muslims go off and study the Quran. But here at Bethlehem University, they are side by side talking about this. And I think that gives insight on both sides. And I think that's a really important part of it. And that sort of leads me to say that, you know, the whole experience of people in Israel-Palestine is one of great sadness, I think. And one of the things I've tried to promote continually is the importance of seeing the sadness, the suffering of everybody. And I think one of the things I promoted before I left was the whole thing within the Palestinians about the suffering of the families of the hostages who were taken by Hamas. I think it's really important for Palestinians to be aware of that. And I hosted, this is a few years back now, a group of people who had formed an association of families who had lost members of the family in the conflict. Muslims, Christians, Israelis and Palestinians. And I found them just an amazing group of people. And I was saying to Kelly, I'm doing a presentation, I'm going from here to Chicago to do a series of lectures there, and one of the things I'm using there is an ad that this group put together 3 years ago now. And I found it quite disturbing when I first saw it, because you get a whole range, probably 15, 20 people saying, we don't want you here. We don't want you here. And what they don't want is more people joining this group of people who have members of their family who have been killed. So they don't want any more. But it's a bit stunning when you hear this time after time after time, and it's a wonderful, I thought, a wonderful ad. But the point I'm trying to make is what we are trying to do is to get people to see that whoever is suffering needs some compassionate support as well.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you wanted to open it up to audience questions. I know.
Absolutely. I'm stunned into silence, which is very uncommon. We've got Louise Cullen over there, please.
Thank you very much, brother, for those incredible insights into the life that's there. Just hearing about the faculty and that they all had to be locals from there. Not all of us are lucky enough as John to travel the world every second week. Do you have online, are there abilities or ways that people can support Bethlehem University by offering, education and just contact sometimes with people outside?
Yeah. That's one of the things I tried to fight, if you like, the whole time I was there. Unfortunately, the Palestinian Ministry of Higher Education does not recognise online learning. And Deakin University, who are under the impression they're in the forefront of online learning in Australia, and Northeastern University in the United States, the same there. Both of them have been in touch with us about establishing, but we couldn't do it because of, it's no good offering courses that are not going to be recognised. But just a little aside, we found out 3 years ago that the Ministry of Labour does recognise online learning. So we have probably 300 to 400 graduates of Bethlehem University in Gaza, and we have not had any since the Second Intifada. The Israelis will not let any students come into Palestine to come to Bethlehem University since 2000. So we tried online, that didn't work. We tried to establish a site down there, a campus down there, and then our people couldn't go down there. Israel wouldn't let them go into Gaza. So we sort of abandoned that. But when we found out that the Ministry of Labour would recognise online learning, we developed a program on project management. And I was down in Gaza a few months before the attack in October, just to find out, whether it was worthwhile. Are there others that we could teach and whatever? And I met with probably about 40 to 40 younger people, say 22 to 35-year-olds. And they were very keen because what they wanted, and the thing that impressed me, not one of them asked me for money. What they were wanting was a qualification that they could take to an NGO or something and say, we can do this for you. And so the project management was one of those. Unfortunately, when I came back from down there and we started developing that, the war hit. And now when I left in the January of last year, I know 3 of those people I was with were killed. And we've lost complete contact with them, and I suspect there are others who have been killed as well. Peter.
Peter, one of the terms that's being described in the last 16 months is scholasticide, with the destruction of all tertiary education in Gaza. I just fear for the what's going to happen in Palestine in terms of education there, and what's your sense of what's going to happen?
I wish I knew. One of the things I came to terms with during those 15 years was the unpredictability of things. We ran into a problem about 4 years ago where our social science students had placements in, this is ironic, they had placements in Jerusalem. And, you know, we were limiting the numbers because of the difficulties of getting placements in Israel and in Palestine. And the Ministry of Education, or Ministry of Higher Education in Israel, decided that the students had to get placements in the, this is interesting, in the country where the university was, okay? So I find this ironic that they don't recognise Palestine as a country, and yet they restrict the places where they can do their internship. So I don't know what's going to emerge. I heard week before last that there was a bill before the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, in which they were promoting the Israeli universities and were proposing that the degrees from Palestinian universities not be recognised in Israel. Now that would have huge impact on us, because it would mean that the students from East Jerusalem that come to Bethlehem University would get a degree in Bethlehem University which would not be recognised in Israel. So they probably would not come. So, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. But sort of we've been travelling for 50 years in unpredictability, you know, and we just carry on, I suppose. Yeah.
Peter, we're about 3.5 minutes over, but I think everyone is done. You were at the session last night when we were talking about the view from 30,000 foot, and the last question last night was from Bridge Patel, and he said, what have you missed out because of your career? And, you know, was there sorrow about it, or would you do it again? From a local boy in Taranaki, in the calmness of New Zealand, you went to one of the most tricky areas. You spent 15 years there, and at the end of your 15 years of building an amazing institution that was there before you, but so much has been undone and scholasticized. Peter, to close, what do you think have you missed out on something because of this job, and would you do it again?
Not only have I not missed out, after I finished at Bethlehem University, and I left in January 2024, and I had the opportunity to do a sabbatical in San Antonio, and then I walked the Camino in Spain. And one of the things that I reflected on as I walked that was reflected back on my life in Waitara and Taranaki, and the freedom that I had, and the opportunities that I had, and the wonderful setting that I was in. And I reflected on the lives of the students with whom I'd been working for 15 years. And I came away with an incredible depth of gratitude for the life that I'd had, and particularly the life that I'd had in those last 15 years. So not only have I not missed out, I've been incredibly enriched as a result of engaging with those people and seeing the way in which they are coping. And I often thought, when I was talking to students and listening to some of the horrific things that they had to put up with, if at their age, was I that brave? Was I that, intuitive? And so I came away incredibly grateful that in those 15 years I had the opportunity to engage with those people, to use the opportunities I had, the influence I had, to try to provide a better opportunity for them. And I'm just incredibly grateful that I've had that opportunity. Yeah, so I have not missed. I've been greatly enriched as a result. So again, as we finish, thank you for this opportunity to talk about Bethlehem University. Thank you for helping me keep hope alive at Bethlehem University. Shukran.